Thank you. Thank you, listeners. You live on Mamos Radio. I'm your host, Rohi Konetige, proudly sponsored by Unique Energy in the Gambia. Please stay tuned. Good evening and welcome to today's news review. You live on Mamos Radio. I'm your host, Rohi Konetige.
Welcome to Gambia Today News Review. Listeners, you're tuned into Mamos Radio on Mamos Media. It is Thursday, the 26th of November 2020. I am Nene with a review of the nation's top headlines coming to you live from Oslo, Norway. We begin with the Mamos Media headlines. Former NIA Director General admits the institution was a torture center. Lamin Baji, former Director General of the National Intelligence Agency NIA, now Security Intelligence Services SIC, has admitted to the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission TRRC that the NIA headquarters in Banjul was a torture center. Listeners, other national headlines starting with the Standard. MFDC had no hand in Koro's murder. The Casamas separatist leader, Salif Sadio, has said speculations peddle that his men might have had a hand in the murder and incineration of former Finance Minister Usman Koro Sise on the 22nd of June 1995 are completely false. Listeners, the Point newspaper has headlined, Gunjur demands NAWEC's compensation. The people of Gunjur in Combo South are demanding compensation from NAWEC for the supply of what they called substandard water over the past 5 years. Foreign newspaper has headlined, President Barrow inspects over US $40 million road project in Banjul. President of the Gambia, Adama Barrow, inspected the Banjul Road project worth over $40 million US. Listeners, thanks for tuning in to the Mamos Media News Review this Thursday.
Thank you, Nene, for today's news review. Listeners, you live on Mamos Radio. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Good evening. I'm your host, Rohi Konetige. On today's news review, Mamos Radio takes a look at the international news making a splash in national newspapers in the United Kingdom and the United States. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Thank you for joining me on Mamos Radio as I take a look at the UK's national newspapers' front pages this Thursday. Metro leads with tributes to footballer Diego Maradona, who has died from a heart attack at the age of 60. The UK economy is set for its biggest slump in 300 years, The Guardian reports. The Daily Mirror describes Diego Maradona as a hero, a villain, a cheat and a genius following his death. The Daily Mail leads with the latest financial news as Britain braces itself for the terrifying cost of COVID. In the hands of God, that's the headline on the front page of The Sun, which marks the death of Diego Maradona. The Chancellor's promise to get Britain through the financial pain of the coronavirus pandemic is on the front page of the Daily Express. Chancellor Rishi Sunak says Britain's economic emergency has only just begun. That's on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. The Times leads with news that the COVID pandemic will cost the British economy 3 years of growth. There is a long-term COVID pain ahead, according to the Financial Times, as borrowing hits £394 billion. The Daily Star leads with the news of the death of Argentinian footballer Diego Maradona. Thank you, listeners. That was the UK's national newspapers' front pages. Please stay tuned. After the break, we take a close look at the Metro and the Daily Mail. Welcome back, listeners. Let's take a close look at the front page of The Times, which has headlined, COVID costs 3 years of growth to economy. Sunak warns Britain's finances face emergency. Rishi Sunak said that Britain's economic emergency had only just begun as the long-term damage that the pandemic has inflicted on growth, jobs and the public finances was laid bare. The Chancellor froze public sector pay and reduced foreign aid yesterday, but must still find tens of billions in tax rises and spending cuts to stop debt from running out of control. Read more on that report on page 2, column 3 of The Times. Also featured on the front page is Maradona pictured lifting the 1986 World Cup trophy in Mexico City, the tournament of his hand of God goal against England. Millions mourn Maradona's death. Diego Maradona, the Argentine football genius regarded by many as the greatest player ever seen, died yesterday, aged 60. Maradona, notorious for his hand of God goal against England in 1986 World Cup, suffered a heart attack at his home in Tigray, near Buenos Aires. Mamos Media team joins the world in mourning his death. We pray he rests in eternal peace. Also captioned on the front page of The Times is Meghan, Miscarriage and Me. Read more on that story on page 2 of The Times. Listeners, let's take a close look at the front page of the Daily Mail, which also leads with the latest financial news of Britain bracing itself for the terrifying cost of COVID, with the headline, "This is going to hurt Britain." Rishi Sunak spells out the terrifying cost of COVID, saying that jobless to hit 2.6 million, national debt will top 2.8 trillion, and a grim warning of years of tax rises ahead. More on that report on page 2 of the Daily Mail. Thank you, listeners. That brings us to the end of tonight's UK national newspapers front pages review with me, Zainab Njaiba. Stay tuned to Mamos Radio for the rest of our news program. Until next time, have a pleasant evening.
Thank you, Zainab Njaiba, for tonight's news review. Listeners, you live on Mamos Radio. Please stay tuned for the rest of tonight's news review. Thank you, listeners. You live on Mamos Radio. I'm your host, Rohi Konetige, proudly sponsored by Unique Energy in the Gambia. Please stay tuned. We'll be back with the Mandinka news with...
Assalamu alaikum badingulu mbale konton na tulu nal konton di mala nal badima la mi marom dol kay kiya man san felen dunta abele makan mamos la radi bumbala kondalta ka ke warama futandale wato wati e pinkana wal ke bajani ka ke fonsi molu tentu anin kafulu meni alon ko kan sembentu e wato bela wal kono tridi kam la kafuba e bila nyaton ko kana kafu dingulu be dawda be tentula ela dobu kendo men e ba ke kan anin mamos la dokula be gambia nin gambia bantala ma fe be ala barka bake ala ke kendia anin nene fam Mamos Media Foundation men be gambia e la kafu nyaton ko na kafu dingulu bebe kontra na bake and momo me alon ko ke la moyna dunia fanna bela ma flabe al nimbara alla kekende ala misamen katon adon kibaro ni fam kono e jiare e la commissione men kera nyaton ko de commissione general e ako lempo mol ka menjo me ya lonko e kesa semene kajo ako nyina mu bundate me ya lonko akoleata bake nina taka kanamo kanin molo bulu ate commissione general men keta yankuba daboti e anyu fa kunyimu bata baleti gambia be men kalamota ka nyu watulu nina ta lempo waran namo mulka menjo me ya lonko ni tamari be la jula ya la warebe kula ita kede sasi kaji ko nyanta kalempo menjo ko nyina keta kuto me ya lonko akoleata bake gambia no bulu nyin tembo nyinna ñin banque biriye bembake me ya lonko yake pour ka ño hakkile bulandi ani ka karandiro ke molula men ya lonko wolale kata ñin namo ñin kanin ako aman sonia han demanding ka moluka kumolu ware ka wosi dal me yitandila ni nata kome ñin ka namo ñin jo ñine mo kuta me ya lonko wala kolate la ñin bunda kambake akondi tulme ya lonko to lakata namo kanula narra ya aka dato me ya lonko wala soniata ñine be kelay to liye dahati anu abe masakunda fana mako la bakele ako nyimbat na mulbele namo jolano ani nyimfana masa kunda mako la pruka kodo sotno kanton ya ke daloto me alon ko asonata pour mo de ajo ata commission ndabo ay nyimfo yenyin mitimbani menke me alon ko UNDP wala tata koma ani masa kunda meme marale naflo ni naflo tamandi nyala banko nyin kan wala liye mitimbani komande pour ka karandroke pour ka je molsi fahamro kanu nyamin anin ka labulu li tandi la mi anon ko prusi do ko nyin keno nyamen ako nyin keda mo be taman serleti anu sediatele ko nga ferol men landi pour ka nyinke pour ka je fanan ka molu dema anon ki pour ka la soto nyin fanan lafa pour ka foire ya ba nyamen gambo banko kan nyimbe nyin mitingo nyo be le tenkumba ina mu dalilo nyinti kibar bunda men save wala mo mamusa mediate iko mo fanan me ya lonko a forcé to dunta député la bumbato aketa kuti me ya lonko nyo sabo nyi warta je bake e ka kata kunu so mandale mo me ya lonko ya tumi dunta député bumbato bire le bengola anu anin mo dunta nyola me ya lonko brikama not ka me alaji s dabo ala doku line to be kede la député bumba nyinto iko moma ya lonko ya tumi men kede yanko ba jaytati a forcé to dunta e kanne birin afuta tumo men na atara ye fonyande ngonyinta e be lañi bemba men na député bumba nyinto ko bewol belo be onyina wala mu kodda fulo nyin 2021 sango nyin men kana kodo men nyanta ka doku nde waran kodo men nyanta ka lande pro kama e bole doku kan yole breakta o kola nata dabo nyinje saba lafta purka kurpenye molu nata duitema iko bar moñing inata mutale ya samba all primary la police station on yinto membe banjunije ani nata alamana ata yusfa iko safer lalamu ay buko safer ka men nako hakilo anunga ko buko nyi yemen safer wala mu pour mol si korsiro ke mol me ya lon ko ka dunga ni ko masillo la katama anunka ferolu fanan landi ni nata batamen katara o silo nyi na pour jani ka futa nyimbe buko nyi o be tengu nyimbe buko nyi konole ana ferolu fanan landi buko nyi kon buko nyi ferolu men fanan safeje pour be fonni kelu mako la nyamen nkeda bukule me ya lon ko ya samba national me ya lon ko ni député bumbara pour si crossiro kala anu député bumbara memo o crossila nyaton kodi wala mu ate Mr Dabo nyinte ko ni Mr Dabo aya tumi akomole me ya lon ko a singolo ko bele kan ku me ya lon ko nyanta katama singolo akana ku me femanta tama kan nyintembo nyinto e kibar bunda men safe wala mu standard la newspaper de iko gambianolu mene ya lonko luntawlu mene be sabatring Italy banko kan gambianolu iko nyin watolu momen kabanje asiatale andu masakuna danila purasi korosiro ke jela ni mole mene gambianolu me ya lonko e kadung e luntawti nyin Europe banku jamaluto ani mol mi yalan korsolal le muti e bela wosini yitandi la purka yitandi la ko bire mol be jamani ayeni wosini yitandi ko man sakunda nyanta ka kisikisirke kaje ko momen kabang sayni watulu luntangol men be Italy asiata bakale anu momen kabang Europe nyun watulu kono alanda tambitale sidi sedi kan mole me yalon ko afananka do ko television o te Italy e bantaba men lo me yalon ko yakay social media bantaba to ka kachake ni na ta luntangol membe marade sabatri ni robban ko kan e ko kachani ke bakale anin point la newspaper e kachanyin ke telefono to ananga foyo ko akomo men ka fa ni watolu tubabudu kara Italy kule meya lonko ay miro sile anu kule meya lonko masakunda nyandaka kunyin kisikisile akuko be damen mol akablandi tambile anu abukatala akalafa le drone akoni nata juben ni sango mbota kono damma mentada fo Gambia ni mo tannani me alonko luntawol lemu Italy banko kam men fata ako andun nyimukute me alonko nyinu be ka safele andi bukalon fananko nyinu men fata ila fasun ta nyaadile a continuera fo ko nyinu men be fata e ke be furo ni samba Gambia le pour la wululalu ani le teroni kanu telu pour isi ibade no nyom bade ya sahayare ngola e Gambia banko kan ke bondi Europe nyin keda kuto me alon ko mon be Europe ke bulo fay nyokan kajo ko pour ka furo ni samba Gambia nyamen pour ala wululalu ala teroni kanu telu sa bade no nyamen kibar bunda men safe wala mo point la newspaper de eko Supreme Court fanan ila kitimu amenkeda sirifo sonkoti anin IEC ila kitimu membe kere ni watulu High Court ya murundile ya murundile kasamba Supreme High Court iko justice mean just iko Supreme Court ni talata tambela menkeda tuwa bakaro tilmu ani naniti November kono ye menketa Mr. Sonkoti me alon ko atlemu kiamante bir Kamala Area Council anun International Electoral Commission IEC ila kiti membe ke High Court iko Justice Hassan Babukar Jallow anatafo ko keso nyin waran kiti nyin ya a kontinendele kasamba la kiti bumba nyinto kandun kiti nyin abe labulo men nyato wala nyamen wala atne ya sayndi ya murundu woto akonata silodi puruka korsir kenyina anunka aitande Justice Hadi C Corey ayini itande lako me alonko walelbe maralin case nyina purka joko ay futa kiti bumbata purusi korsiro kala so kito nyin inata ajoine iba murla kota ka puruka kachanyin kenyin tenano November koroko atiri tansaba kachanyin be continental kota ke kibar bunda men safe wala mu fore ala newspaper de baade mu jena mu kibaroti men fotata me temenna ka futan dalma na beta do ko ma solo no nga fo ma fo kun sounda al salon harmadi ana so da malum al badi ma lamin maron dol kay kiyam man sam ban ni bara fo nyatondo.
Thank you, listeners. You live on Mamos Radio. I'm your host, Rohi Konetige, proudly sponsored by Unique Energy in the Gambia. Please stay tuned. Thank you, listeners. You live on Mamos Radio. I'm your host, Rohi Konetige, proudly sponsored by Unique Energy in the Gambia. Please stay tuned.
Talibe Metu Sheikh Khalif Abdul Aziz Haidara akagama ba menke sango sang ikamenke lameng Babylon na sate nyi kono iko ba flali mobe dawda ba flali nyin December karo men kana atili lulu gama bani ibakala lamin sado nyin kono ibakala Khalif Abdul Aziz Haidara suwin kono mobe dawda ba flali nyin December karo tili lulu gamo nyin kala ko ba flali kabo talam fula kata talal lulu be kala alqur'ana karamolati molbe janjana talal lulu talal woro suto talantan gama banyi fongbe datila fo somanda oto ba fala mole be dawda e be ngama kibaro ni ba fatandali bari folo ba fala khalifatul amma Sheikh Muhammad Amin Haidara Sheikh Yakub Haidara Sheikh Ibrahim Haidara e be ngamo ni kibaro e ba fatandale be ma President Adama Barrow anala cabinet e be kibaro ni fatandale be ma party leader of UDP memo honorable Ousainou Daboti UDP la party nyatonko nala dimbayalu e benyin kibaro ñu futan la ifanama lead council TRRC Esafal anala dimbayalu honorable Yakumba Jaite anabama aja Senabu e benyin kibaro futan la fanama Honorable Lawyer Bori Toure iba futan la fanama Honorable Alaji Momodu Tangara ana musuma aja Mama Safi Samba aja Mariam Tambedu anun Tambedu la dimbayal mume ibenyin kibaro ñu futan le be fanama Honorable Councilor Bintu Keba Jaite member Banjul Tobacco Road Demba El Jame Giare Lamin Damfa Kanifing Master Muhammad Jabi Sabiji Abdullah Haidara Burusbe Halif Sidu Muhtar Jabi Pirang Binta Jabang America Salif Baba Fai Busura Aida Sise America Mansur Jaju Sheikh Nuha Dabo Jamila Sise Fatou Sidibe America Ya Sain America, Suleiman Bajo America, Umar Sajo Germany, Sajo Jaju America, Mustafa Sise Germany, Dudu Jame Italy, Alhaji Karamba Sise UK, Imam Baba Sise Farato, Fatou Jang UK, Fafa Sise UK, Lamino Sise Jeddah Saudi Arabia, Nene Bojang Norway, Lamin Marong Norway, Mam Jara Buso, Ibrahima Lamin Job Dakar, Ndai Fatou Titi Dakar, Abdul Wahab Cham Dakar, Abdullah Njai, Aning Salifu Durame University Germany, Boru Dabo, Bruce B, Babylon la Talibe Kafo, la Kafonyina Vice President Menketa Alhaji Aliou Toureju, Yaya Chaku Diba, Samba Jawne, anung la daira Kafo membe Birkama, e ben kibaro nyum futan la ifanan bema. Badum hanisa iba fala tonya tabala alkalo anila almamo Khalif Khawsu Fati Jifarong Sirifunding Fati anum nyataba e ben kibaro nyum futan le bema pour mobe dawde e bisika mabelati Sambu Sise anamusuma menkere Mariama Jamete Sheikh Mohamed Khalifa membe Senegal anun ila Khalifol membe be Gambia anin duna fana jamala e ben kibaro futan le bema ani ba fala fonon Alhaji Baba Jamme and SG Jere Jabi Ibrahima Sanu Yaya Sise Jaratonya Taba Abukar Njai Spain Lamin Darame Sweden Mohamed Sise ani Sise Kunda la dimba ya lube ibe nkibaro fudan lebema ani say koma nyina fanan molu mene ya lonko ibe Babylon bir musu foke ani la Babylon na kibalu ibe dawda ibe ngama ba kibaro ibe fudan lebema ani ibe Babylon na kibalu fanan ibe kontrol na bake ani ba fala fanan memu ila chairmanote anin ila vice chairman o menkeda Usman Marong e ben kibaro futan la fanan bema ani la secretary general fanan menkeda Alassana Marena e ba fala fanan ko e bunya ben ngama batu nyi menkana ani alkalo ani anima mo membe Babylon alkali ani la alma mo membe Kerwane mandirarina alkalo ani la almamo lamena alkalo ani la animamo yundum la alkalo anila almamo busumbala la alkalo anila almamo farato la alkalo anila almamo anin iko muslimolu momo yalon ko ka fa la ilaha illallah iben kibaro nyi futandali bema gambia ni gambia bantala pour mo sakata koku ni bemba men kana ni gama ba men kana ni disema ka tilulu furakana fo moko ani ba fala fanan ko iko tonya taba dingo be dawda membe gambia ni gambia bantle ben kibaro futandle ba kere kere futandal bema ani ba fala men fana mo Muhammad Jata membe State House Musandaw KMC Sheikh Tidiane Fofana Sheikh Sanyang PMO Lawyer Jobate Ansu Sane Ansu Cisse PMO Amadou Drame membe Italy Baboucar Mbaye an Moussa Drame ngin bebe Italy mbadum ko ba fala momo be dawda be Gambia bantala ko ba fala nyi ngama ba mi yalon ko akana ni dise makaro ko ba fala abunya be mobeje momo isi aussi futande no isaka de futaje kabe kala lamin tole be kala Babylon lamen ba kala wolto an be Qur'an karam kala somanda sudu tilo talam fula fokata talal lulu Qur'an karam be kala mole duwa ke janjang sudo talan tang gama ba fon be kala wala fo somanda andi ko ba fala fanan nimo ma yalon ko e lafta pour ka kula nyin koto nyul ko no limo mel lonje yegol ko mani be kubondi le nyotole mbadumulu nyina mu gama bati me yalon ko sangu sang akake lamen Babylon sata nyin kono akana fo moko ala baraka bake ala ma kay rodi lambela wassalam.
Gay, proudly sponsored by Unique Energy in the Gambia. Please stay tuned. Thank you, listeners. You live on Mamos Radio. I'm your host, Rohi Konetige, proudly sponsored by Unique Energy in the Gambia. Please stay tuned. Thank you, listeners. That was the end of tonight's news review from the Mamos team. To my co-host, Nene Zainabou Njaiba, Honorable Pa Asan Bajan, BEM, CEO Lamin Marong, known as Kiang Mansa. I'm your host, Rohi Konatege, to our Mamos technician, Lennox Asan, and Mr. Boridabo, our country director and marketing manager in the Gambia. Also to our Mamos News Desk, chief editor, Mr. Suleiman Dabo, news editor, Lamin Sanyang, Mamos reporters on tonight's news review, Usman Marong and ML Bojang. Special thank you to the Nenes Fans Club. Thank you, listeners, once again. We'll be back tomorrow, 8 p.m. GMT. On that note, we say good night and bye.
Vamos, el Lord of Media. timpana borida bojulu